The coach left her in a coughing cloud of dust, and the driver didn't look back. Wooden wheels rattled down the road until silence claimed the earth again. She stood still a long while, one hand on her bag, the other folded tightly over her stomach, where the child turned like a whisper beneath her ribs. The town was little more than 2 streets and a church bell. It smelled of iron, hay, and stale coffee. A wind stirred, dragging dry leaves across the ground, wrapping them around her boots like pleading fingers. The only movement came from the general store, its porch shaded, occupied by 3 old men in straw hats who watched her like she was something they'd forgotten how to name. She walked toward them, her shoes gathering grit. A redbird screeched somewhere in the trees beyond. She passed a sign leaning sideways in the dirt. Willow Creek, EST 1841. Inside the store, the air was thick with tobacco and the sharp bite of pickling vinegar. The woman behind the counter had a thin, pressed mouth and hands that never stopped moving. She didn't say hello, just looked the girl up and down, and then pointed toward the row of flour sacks. "I'm looking for Elijah Thorne," she said, her voice too soft, too careful. The woman behind the counter paused, blinked slow, and said, "You're her." She didn't answer. She didn't have to. Too late, the woman added. "He was here yesterday. Said he changed his mind. Said you were compromised." The word rang through the room like a cracked bell. Behind her, someone chuckled. One of the men on the porch, now come inside. His boots dragged. "Ought to send her back on the coach," he said. "We got enough trouble round here." She didn't flinch. She pressed her lips tight, as if holding in water. The woman slid a small bundle across the counter, a folded blanket, a jar of jerky, a crusted tin of matches. "It's not much." The preacher's wife put it together when she heard, "You best go before sundown." She left without speaking. Outside, children had begun to gather at a distance, staring the way they might stare at a dead fox. No one offered a wagon. No one asked her name. The shack stood a mile outside town, just past the broken fence that once guarded the old military trail. It slouched to the west, half its roof caved in. A chimney rose like a finger, pointing nowhere. It looked abandoned, but not unlived in. Someone had once made bread here, once wept beside the hearth. But they were gone now. She pushed open the door and stepped inside. Her boots left small prints in the dirt floor. Mice skittered in the corner. The air smelled of ashes and pine mold. Still, it was more welcome than town. That night, the fire she built barely warmed the room. Her fingers ached from gathering branches. Wind clawed through the cracks in the walls, and the baby kicked again, stronger this time, like he knew. She unwrapped the blanket and placed it on the floor, folded her coat over it, then sat with her back to the wall and stared at the flames until they blurred. She took out the letter, creased and softened by weeks, in her dress pocket. She read the words again, though she could recite them by heart. "You'll be safe here. I'll provide a roof, food, and dignity. A clean start for us both." Elijah had signed it with a God-fearing hand. Every word sounded more like barter now. She crumpled it and threw it into the fire. The flames hissed, took it, spat black flakes into the room. She whispered a name, quiet, broken, swallowed by the crackle. Not the child's name. That hadn't come yet. This was a man's name. The one who had said he'd fix it. The one who had run. In the morning, her world narrowed. Hunger dulled her thoughts, and the wind had teeth. She wrapped herself tighter in her coat and set about cleaning. There was no stove, just a blackened hearth and a rusted kettle with something hard and white clinging to its inside. She dumped it out, tried not to imagine what it had once been. She found a broken stool in the corner and used it to block the hole where the door didn't shut. The place would never be warm, but it could be hers, if no one burned it down. From a small knothole near the floor, she watched the prairie. The land rolled on forever, grasses swaying like a mother's lullaby, and sky so wide it felt like punishment. In the distance, she saw a boy leading a mule. His shirt was torn, one eye covered with a patch. He glanced toward the shack, but didn't stop. His silence felt kinder than words. At dusk, she returned to town only once, wrapped in the preacher's wife's shawl. just to trade a ribbon from her hair for a loaf of cornbread. The storekeeper made her wait until everyone else had left. "You planning to keep it?" the woman asked, not unkindly. "Just tired." She nodded. The woman paused. "Then stop waiting for someone to come. No one will." She left with the bread. That night, a storm crept low across the horizon. She could smell it before she heard it. Wet earth, old wood. She sat close to the fire, arms curled around her knees. The child shifted again. Strong. Alive. She remembered once being that way too. Sleep didn't come. Only the hiss of wind through splinter walls, and somewhere far off, the howl of wolves. Or men. She could no longer tell the difference. But when dawn came, gold and quiet, the land was still. Her breath left clouds in the morning air. The world had not ended. She stood outside, wrapped in her coat, watching the frost melt from the grasses. Her belly rose gently beneath the fabric. And for the first time since stepping off the coach, she did not look toward town. She looked toward the horizon, toward the place where the sky kissed the earth and no one could follow. And for a moment, just long enough to matter, she felt the stirrings of something dangerous. Hope. The first time he saw her, she was dragging wet timber across a soaked field with her dress hiked to the knees and mud streaking her cheeks like war paint. Her hair was unbound, tangled with straw and rain. He didn't speak, just watched from a ridge until she turned and spotted him. She didn't flinch, just stared like she was daring the world to give her another reason to fight. He dismounted, slow. Let his rifle rest easy across his back. "You're trespassing," she said, though the land wasn't his nor hers, and they both knew it. "I brought sugar," he replied. He tossed her the small sack. She caught it with one hand and didn't thank him. She hadn't seen him before, but she'd heard. They all had. The half-breed horseman with a scar down his jaw and no real home. Apache mother, white cavalry father, fought for the North, then the South, then no one at all. He spoke little, rode alone, fixed fences for whiskey and tracked wolves for gold. People called him cursed, but only behind his back. He came by the shack again the next day, this time carrying nails, a hammer, and 2 boards slung over one shoulder. Said nothing, just started patching the hole above the door. She watched from inside, arms crossed, belly now clearly round beneath her coat. He never looked at her, just worked until the sun tilted westward and left without a word. The third day it rained again, a cold, needling rain that found every crack in her roof and seeped through her bones. Fever took her fast. By the time she collapsed by the hearth, skin slick and breath shallow, she was alone. She woke to the smell of tobacco and cedar smoke, to firelight dancing across the walls and a heavy wool blanket drawn up to her chin. Her dress was dry, her lips cracked. He sat near the hearth, elbows on his knees, rubbing something between his fingers. Her knife was gone from her waistband, resting beside his boot. "You shouldn't have moved me," she said, voice like gravel. "You were drowning in your own sweat," he replied. "Didn't think modesty would outlive you." His tone wasn't cruel, just flat, like a stone skipping once then sinking. "You don't know me," she whispered. "I know enough." That night passed in quiet fits. She drifted in and out, half mad with heat. Once she saw him stand and walk outside, barefoot in the storm, arms spread as if testing the rain. Another time, she thought he was humming to her, a low sound like wind beneath floorboards. She never asked. By morning, she could sit up. He fed the fire and handed her tea with a pinch of crushed root in it. Bitter. Healing. "You a doctor?" she asked. "I've buried enough to know what kills," he answered. He returned that evening with 2 fish and a spool of twine. She didn't ask where he came from, but his boots were muddy and his knuckles bruised. She noticed the way he winced when he moved his shoulder. She offered no comfort, and he didn't seek it. "You got a name?" she asked finally. He glanced at her. "People call me Hawk. Because you fly alone? Because I see what others don't." She didn't laugh. "That's not always a gift." He looked at her belly, then. "Not long. Just one blink too long." She stiffened. "You think I'm shameful too?" "No," he said. "I think you're brave to stay." His words landed like stones in water. Slow to sink, impossible to forget. The next morning, she found a bundle of chopped wood beside her door, a coil of rope, a rabbit already skinned. No note, no tracks. In town, the whispers changed. Not softer, just stranger. She's shacking up with the breed. He's got her under some spell. The preacher warned against corruption, but his voice trembled when he said it. One afternoon, she found Hawk fixing the back wall without asking. She watched him a while, arms folded across her chest, weighing silence. "Why do you keep coming back?" she asked. He drove a nail in slow, careful. "Because no one else will." She didn't reply. She just stepped beside him, took the hammer, and nailed the next board. From then on, he came in daylight. Never slept under the same roof, but sometimes lingered by the fire until stars pressed against the window like curious spirits. She told him pieces of her story. How the preacher's son in Kansas whispered promises between baptisms and bed linens. How she believed a name could protect her. How she'd bled alone when the town threw stones. He listened without blinking. "Men like that die slow," he said once. She didn't know if it was a wish or a memory. In return, he told her little. Just fragments. A brother buried in New Mexico. A horse that once saved him from a Comanche spear. A woman with blue hands and a silver ring who said love didn't forgive everything. He didn't say what broke him, only that it stayed broken. One evening, she dropped a pot and gasped, not from pain, but from a child kicking hard against her ribs. She gripped the table, breath shallow. Hawk crossed the room in 2 strides. "You all right?" he asked, steadying her. She nodded. "He's just fighting for space." He crouched, hesitated. "Can I?" She took his hand and guided it to her stomach. The baby kicked again, fierce and certain. Hawk's eyes softened, just for a breath. "Strong," he said. She nodded. "I hope he stays that way." His hand lingered. Her breath caught. Then the moment passed, and he stepped away like it burned. That night, after he left, she stood at the threshold and watched him disappear into the trees, his silhouette swallowed by fog. She didn't cry, just pressed her hands over the life within her and whispered something only the wind could hear. By now, he had repaired half the shack, lined the fireplace with new stones, and planted 4 rows of corn that might never sprout. He said little about tomorrow. She said less. But when the blacksmith's one-eyed boy came riding past one morning and tipped his hat, she noticed something had shifted. The town might still judge, but now it watched too. Watched a woman who didn't bend and a man who didn't run. Watched them build something quiet and stubborn out of rejection. And though she didn't know what would come next, what storm or rider might crest the hill, she felt it now. The beginning of something. Not safety, not peace, but the faint, relentless beat of resolve. The boy was born under a sky bruised with thunder. Rain swept the plains in horizontal sheets, and lightning forked across the hills like veins pulsing in a god's clenched fist. Inside the shack, the air was heavy with iron and heat, the fire gone cold hours ago. She bit down on a leather strap, sweat slicking her skin like oil, her fingers clawing the dirt floor. The pain came in waves now, each one sharper than the last, cutting her from the inside out. Hawk knelt beside her, sleeves rolled to his elbows. Hand steady though his face was carved with worry. He'd never done this before, but he'd watched a mare give birth once. That had to count for something. "Breathe," he said, voice low, grounded. "He's coming." She didn't scream. Not once. Just moaned like something ancient, torn from the land itself. When the baby slipped free, slick and red and wailing, Hawk held him with reverence, like he was something sacred, something holy. She collapsed, breathing shallow, her eyes open but unfocused. "Is he?" she began, too afraid to finish. "He's here," Hawk said. "And he's fierce." She smiled, weakly, then passed out before she could hold him. The baby thrived. Fast to latch, quick to cry, and slow to sleep. Hawk built a cradle from cedar wood and hung it near the hearth, lining it with rabbit fur and soft cloth. She named the boy something old, something unspoken between them, but never shared aloud in town. Let the world keep its assumptions. For weeks, Hawk lingered longer, sometimes sleeping in the shed he'd built beside the shack, sometimes on the floor by the fire. He hunted, carved toys, mended her boots, and carried water from the creek without being asked. "You act like his father," she told him once, watching him rock the baby in the early dawn light. He didn't look up. "Maybe I am." She didn't argue, didn't name it. Some things were too fragile for labels. She just watched as the firelight caught the edge of his jaw, and for the first time felt something close to safe. But peace doesn't last on frontier soil. Not where grudges grow thicker than wheat. One afternoon, Hawk returned with blood on his knuckles and a crack across his lip. He wouldn't say what happened. Just rinsed his hands at the basin and stood staring out the window too long. Later, the preacher's wife came riding hard down the trail, her bonnet flapping like a broken bird. "He's been accused," she said, breath short. "They say Hawk struck a man near the tavern. White man. A rancher. Claimed he made a pass at you once, got rejected." She nodded, slowly. "And what happened to the rancher?" The woman hesitated. "Nothing yet. But his brothers are coming. With rope." That night, the shack felt smaller. The walls closer. Every crack seemed a place for danger to whisper through. "You should go," she told Hawk, holding the baby against her shoulder. He shook his head. "If I run, I'm guilty. If I stay, I'm prey. Either way, they've already decided." She swallowed. "Then stay and make them regret it." The fire between them flared. Not passion, not rage, something older. A pact. A silent agreement carved into bone. In the days that followed, he reinforced the door and buried supplies under the floorboards. She boiled water, sharpened her knives, taught herself where to place a bullet if it ever came to that. They moved without panic, but with purpose. The way people do when they've both lost too much to be afraid. The child never cried when Hawk held him, only stared with wide, unblinking eyes, like he recognized something familiar, some old sorrow made flesh. Then one night the wind changed. They heard the riders before they saw them. 6 in total, maybe more. Hooves pounding like war drums across the prairie. The moon was high, the stars veiled. She stood at the window, rifle loaded, the baby pressed against her chest. Hawk placed his hand on her shoulder. "Let me go out first." "No," she said, voice hard. "They want to see me helpless. I won't give them that." They stood side by side as the riders approached, their torches flickering against the dark. One called out, voice slurred, cocky. "Send out the half-breed. We got questions only a tree can answer." Hawk stepped forward, calm as stone. "You want justice?" he said. "Then bring proof." Laughter answered him. "We got rope. That's all we need." The rifle cracked once. A torch dropped. The men scattered just enough. One screamed. Another cursed. "You've made your statement," Hawk called. "Now ride. Before the ground remembers your blood." They didn't expect it. Not from her. Not from him. A woman with a child, a man with no name, facing them without flinching. And something in that, something silent and sacred, made them turn. Not out of mercy, but because even cowards know when a ghost has teeth. By dawn, they were gone. One torch still burned near the fence line, smoke curling into the pale sky. The boy slept through it all. She stood outside, arms folded, wind catching her hair. Hawk walked beside her, his face unreadable. "They'll come back," he said. She nodded. "Then we'll be ready." He looked at her then, really looked. "You could have left. Could have handed me over." "I'm tired of losing the people I love," she answered. A silence fell. Not empty, full of things unsaid. Full of everything that might still grow. He touched her cheek, rough fingers brushing away soot. She didn't lean in, didn't pull away. Not yet. Inside, the baby stirred. A cry rose, soft, searching. And Hawk moved first, stepping back toward the cradle like he'd done it 100 times. Like it meant something. Like he was already part of the story being written in wood smoke and blood. Outside, the prairie waited. And the horizon watched. The letter arrived in late spring, carried by a boy too small for the saddle he rode and too scared to meet Hawk's eyes. He handed it over, without a word, and turned his pony hard, kicking up dust as he fled back the way he came. The envelope bore no name, just a crude drawing. 3 interlocked rings, like the brand of some forgotten covenant. She watched Hawk read it by the window, his shoulders rigid, jaw tight as river stone. She didn't ask what it said. The silence around him was louder than thunder. That night he didn't eat, didn't sit by the fire or check the perimeter before dusk fell. He stood outside in the open, under stars sharp as glass, letting the cold wrap around him like penance. She stayed inside, nursing the boy who was teething now, squirming and gumming the corner of a wool blanket. But her eyes kept drifting to the door, to the man who had not asked to be part of their story, but had bled himself into its ink anyway. When Hawk came in near dawn, his voice was hoarse. "I need to go." She didn't flinch. "Why?" "There's a man in Larkspur. Says he knows the truth about my father. About what really happened at Three Fork Ridge." Her breath caught. He'd never spoken of that place before, not even in fragments. Not even when whiskey loosened his tongue. He says he has proof. Names. Says the cavalry covered up something, left my mother in a ditch with a bullet in her spine. I need to know. She looked at him, at the man who had pulled her from fever, built cradles, fixed fences, held her son like he was his own. And if it's true? His eyes, rimmed with something older than grief, met hers. Then I stop running. Or I start again. Either way, I stop being half of myself. The boy woke, let out a soft cry. She rocked him gently, never breaking Hawk's gaze. "You come back," she said. "Or don't go at all." He nodded once. No promises. Only wait. 2 days later, he left before dawn. No goodbye. Just a single braid of horsehair tied to the latch on the door, a sign from his people meaning, "I will return if the land allows." The shack felt too still without him. The boy grew quieter, as if sensing the shift. She chopped wood with fury, shot 2 rattlesnakes near the fence, and turned away 3 traders with 2 long stares. But every dusk, she looked west, waiting for hooves. Listening. He returned after 10 days, leaner, darker around the eyes. A long scar stitched fresh across his collarbone. She said nothing, just opened the door and stepped aside. He held a letter in his hand. Old. Torn. Dated years before the war. It named names. Confirmed truths only whispered in backrooms. His father had ordered the massacre. Had covered it with medals and false reports. The child of that slaughter had survived. Grown. Returned. "I wanted to kill him," Hawk said. "But he was already dying. Rotting from the inside. So I watched instead. Made him speak it. All of it." She nodded. "That's a kind of justice." He looked at the boy sleeping in a cradle. "I told him about you. About both of you. Told him what family really is." She stepped closer, hands trembling. "And what did he say?" Hawk smiled then, just a crack of something real. He cried. Spring gave way to summer. The corn finally sprouted. Hawk built a porch out front, lined with wildflowers the boy kept trying to eat. They lived slow, like the land, weathering storms, fixing fences, laughing sometimes. Sometimes not. But peace is never final. One morning, a rider came at full gallop, horse foaming, shirt soaked in blood. Not his own. "They're coming," he gasped, falling to his knees. "Preacher's dead. The ranchers, 10 maybe more. Said the boy's a curse. That you're raising a heathen." Hawk didn't speak. Just turned to her, eyes calm. "We stand or we run." She looked at her son. Then at the land. Then at Hawk. "We finish what we started." They boarded the windows. Dug trenches. Laid snares and traps, sharpened stakes, and loaded every rifle. That night, the 3 of them slept side by side on the floor, the boy nestled between them, unaware that war would soon cross his doorstep. The attack came at dawn. Gunshots cracked like dry branches. Fire arrows lit the eastern wall. Smoke crawled into the cracks. But they didn't run. Hawk fought like a man who had nothing left to prove and everything left to lose. She shot a man in the neck as he tried to breach the back, her hand steady, her face stone. The boy wailed in the cellar, but the sound grounded them. 3 men made it inside. One she knifed. One Hawk tackled through a beam. The third pointed a rifle at the cradle, empty. Then a gunshot rang out. The preacher's widow stood in the doorway, double barrel in hand, her eyes bright with fire and vengeance. That boy's gonna grow up, she said, spitting into the blood-soaked dirt. And he's gonna change this place. Silence followed. By noon, the attackers were gone, dead, fled, or captured. Hawk limped, one arm wrapped in blood-soaked cloth. She had a gash across her thigh, stitched tight with thread and grit. But the boy was safe. They buried the fallen, tended to wounds, then sat on the porch as dusk painted the sky in bruises and flame. You could have left, she said quietly. I never wanted to, he answered. The baby crawled between them, babbling nonsense and chewing on a pine cone. She looked at Hawk, at the scarred jaw, the tired eyes, the slow-burned soul she now knew better than her own breath. You still think you're half a man? She asked. He shook his head. I think I was waiting to be whole. She reached out and took his hand. The prairie wind rustled the fields. The stars blinked to life, one by one. And somewhere in the darkness beyond, the old myths began to rewrite themselves, not with ink or gospel, but with grit, blood, and a new kind of truth. Family is what you fight for. Legacy is what you protect. And redemption is earned one firelit night at a time.